When we talk about war memory today, we seem to only be able to find words like unspeakable or indescribable, and that says something about the way in which we're still grappling with the enormity of what happened. My name is Akiko Hashimoto, and I wrote a book called The Long Defeat: Cultural Trauma, Memory, and Identity in Japan. This book is about the long shadow of war memory that's cast over the post-war generations of Japan today. It's really about how people remember the past with very mixed feelings and mixed views, but all of them anchored in the collective sense that they've done something disastrous in the past. And that is irreparable and irrevocable. And people have different interpretations of the past because in many ways we like to remember the past in a way that is convenient to us. Yes, Japan has a history problem, and that means there are unfinished businesses that stem from World War II. Think about the disputes that we have with China, Russia, and the Koreas about the border islands that are contested. Think about the issues of post-war compensations of former forced laborers and also former comfort women that are still unresolved. Thirdly, there is the issue of remilitarization. This is very contentious. If you ask people hypothetical questions, what would you do if your country were attacked today? And would you volunteer to take up arms to defend your country? Will you sacrifice yourself for the country? Japan scores astonishingly low, lower than 59 other countries that are in the surveys. And it is because of the way in which the Japanese have come to develop a peace identity. And for some people, it's really the most important way in which they atone for the past. It represents a vow on the part of Japan that it will never make that same mistake again. I wanted to understand why the wartime generation did what they did. Writing this book had been a very humbling experience because it was hard for me to empathize with the wartime generation. And because I carry this burden of being a descendant, like many people of my generation, my family was also touched by the war. And that's why this book is very close to my heart. My mother experienced it on the home front, losing the house that my grandfather had built in an air raid, the Tokyo air raid. I knew that my father had been drafted into the Japanese Navy toward the end of the war, and that he was stationed in a place called the Truk Islands. I wish I'd been able to ask him more direct questions about his experiences so that I could understand what the war meant to him. But it seemed painful to ask, it seemed awkward to ask, and so I waited to see if there would be an opportunity sometime, but that opportunity never came. And so these are lost dialogues that I could have had that I wish I'd had. And there are many others like me of my generation who missed out on this dialogue as well. People have responded to the legacy of war in different ways. There were periods of collective silence that Japan experienced. There were also periods in which there were intense controversies about what went wrong and who was to blame and what to do about it. And there are really three groups of people. And there are people, on the one hand, who belittle what happened and accuse the occupation of carrying out victor's justice. There are people who feel that they were so victimized themselves with the air raids and the atomic bombings in Japan that they are unable to think beyond that. And still others, there are people who want to atone and right the wrongs that happened and bring about some sense of justice and closure with our East Asian neighbors. We need to move forward by trying to understand each other's differences and try to see where we can find common ground because the world is changing, East Asia is changing, and we are in a good place to try and remember the past and think about how that affected us, how that changed our lives, We don't have to inherit everything from the past in the way in which they wanted to hand over to us. We should forge our own path in the way in which we can make a better neighborhood in East Asia.